Taylor Decker's on my all-22 fantasy team.
Stop. They don't care.
So the strategic component to this game is through the roof.
Your predictions, right? Your forecasting in fantasy football into how good is this player?
This is it's gonna change the industry.
Yeah, I moved to the old town where it goes down. Look at me now. I wrote my goals down. I hold it down. Made myself proud.
What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the All-22 podcast. I'm Chris Lombardi, and I'm with Ray Cotto. Everyone, we are live for signups. If you haven't done it yet and you're listening to this podcast, I don't know what you're doing, but you can go ahead and use promo code second season. That is the number 2 ND season for $20 off your All-22 membership for 2023. So make sure you're getting in there and signing up. We have a month left to draft, right? So you got to get in there now. You got to get your league set up and you need to start drafting. Hopefully this podcast has been helping you out with that and you're taking some of those tips that we've been giving, and hopefully you're ready to compete. Ray, I'm super excited though, because we have a big weekend coming up. We have the Fantasy Football Expo. For those of you that don't know, every year this amazing gentleman, Bob Lung, puts together this awesome expo in Canton, Ohio, that is for fantasy football. It's all fantasy football fans going to meet other fantasy football fans, but also getting to meet people like us. If you are, interested in going, get out there. It's not that expensive to go to at all. I think tickets are, what are they, like $20, Ray? Something like that. It's not bad.
No, not at all.
And you get a swag bag. You get a lot of free stuff. Everybody's giving out free stuff. Stop by our booth, which is, of course, booth 22. And maybe you'll get something for free, too. So we look forward to seeing everybody there that'll be there. But, Ray, I'm super pumped about it. We have, the flag tournament we did last year. We have a lot of, fun little things we got going on. What are you most excited about?
Yeah, it's a great event. I was recently on Bob's Fantasy Football Expo podcast a couple weeks back. Just talking about it, and it's an awesome event. Anyone who loves football, fantasy football, it's a must have on your sort of itinerary. And of course, it's in Canton. It's at the Hall of Fame, so it should be on everyone's bucket list anyway if you're listening to this podcast. But it's a great event. You meet a ton of cool people, learn a ton about football, fantasy football, and all these cool products that are out there. It's truly a blast. So yeah, kudos to Bob Lung, because this thing has grown into just something truly spectacular. So all props to Bob, and can't wait to go back out there this weekend, just a couple of days.
For sure. I feel like last year we made so many memories. We made so many friends. So I'm excited to go back and see people and be like, we met last year, and we'll have a drink. We'll have a lot of great conversations. So looking forward to that. But let's kick it off, right? Big episode.
Well, hold on, Chris. Before we kick it off, you're gonna have a little mini therapy session, right? I got a question for you. I need to know if you feel like I feel
session.
right now.
Do you think I need therapy, or do you need therapy?
This is all 22 therapy right now, right? I got to know. Okay. Do you also have this? It's this time of year, right around now. Second week of August. I get this pit in my stomach, this sick feeling in my stomach, and it's not because I'm going to line up against Des Bryant in 72 hours or so. I'm ready for that. I'm built for that. That's fine. But football's. The NFL season's 4 weeks away, right?
Mm-hmm.
All these things that I have to do before I pretty much put the world on pause for 4 to 5 months, starting in September, right? It's all these things that have to get done, that I want to get done. All these books I have to read. You ever just you're hanging out, you're lounging around. You kind of go through YouTube and you just see these cool, you go down these little rabbit holes, these cool things, whether it's about, about whatever, any topic, business or old cartoons or cool videos, Goku versus Frieza, full fight, English dub, original, I'm going to sit and watch this for the next 25 minutes, none of that happens during the season. That's all off season content that gets me through to the season. I got Netflix documentaries I have to watch. I have to finish quarterbacks. There's the Johnny Manziel thing. I think the Florida Gators have something coming up next week or something, right? So that's out. So it's I got to take all this content in. There's so much that has to get done before we basically I think Andrew Brandt coined it. You go into the submarine for the NFL season. It's almost here. Do you have that sick feeling, or is it just me?
I have that feeling. Ray. You know that I'm moving, so I have a move that I'm doing, and it will look no different to anybody else because I'm literally moving 2 floors below where I live now. So it'll be the exact same kind of look for everybody else, but I'm moving, right? So like I have a move coming up, a lot of kind of like big life things, right? So just preparing for a lot of different things. But yeah, like I have like that like kind of pre-football list. I'm reading a book on Abraham Lincoln, learned that he was like, did you know he was like a world-class wrestler?
President? I think I did. I think I did learn that in elementary school. He was a big wrestler.
You went to a better school than me. I don't know, but like I did not know that, and I was like, that is amazing. I would like want to read about Lincoln and learn more about him. So I'm reading like a book about Lincoln that I got to finish. I saw Oppenheimer. That was on my kind of to-do list, so I got to check that one off. What else? Like there's
Barbie.
a lot of stuff. I saw Barbie. I did see Barbie.
Nice. Okay.
Got to go with the wife.
Not yet.
Got to go see Barbie. I thought it was a kid's movie. It is not a kid's movie. So just prepare yourself for that.
No, it is not. No,
it is not a kid's movie. Mm-hmm. But yeah, this year more than ever, do I have that feeling because being a Packer fan, I never really worried about the preseason, right? It didn't tell me all that much about my team. This year is going to be a lot different, right? I get to see what Jordan Love looks like in a more expanded role, thinking they're going to give him a lot of preseason time. And I am incredibly nervous for that, right? Because I have no idea what to expect. It's been kind of like to this point, we've just been, me, I'm like all for like, let the quarterback sit and learn, like get a guy, let him sit and learn for a few years before you put him in. So I love the way we did it, but like, that's not how things are done anymore. So I really don't know how it's going to turn out. So that feeling is definitely there.
Yep. Awesome. Okay. So it's not just me. It's good. We have strength in numbers now, it's like solidarity. That's a good thing. I feel better. Yeah. Needed to get that off my chest. Like there's going to be no, oh, look, the farewell address to HBO boxing just pulled up on my YouTube feed. I'm going to be able to watch that now. Yeah, that made me sad. Like there's none of that for months. So
for months,
got to get it all out now.
Got to lock in now. Yep. Right. All right. Yeah. Let's jump into it. Malik Hooker is the first thing we're going to talk about. Not an exciting way to kick it off, but I think it's an important way to kick it off because Malik Hooker, after a very turbulent start to his NFL career with injuries, proves that he can last a full season and almost immediately, right, gets this pretty decent payday from the Cowboys. 3 years worth up to $21 million. He was one of my favorite players from the 2017 draft. I loved him, right? I love a player that can be a ball hawk, can be explosive, can be a playmaker. And that's kind of what every team looks for. But those injuries early on sidelined his career. You haven't really heard much about him until last year when the Cowboys took a risk on him, and it seems to have paid off. I like the deal, right? So 3 years, $21 million. I think there is an out for the Cowboys so they could get rid of some of that money if it doesn't work out. But what's the worst that could happen, right? We're used to the Cowboys making these giant investments in players like Zeke, where that the end of that contract isn't going to be good. But you look at a guy like Hooker, who's I'm trying to remember how old he is. Do you have it written
down
27.
Anywhere? Yeah, he's 27.
He's 27, right? So a 3-year deal takes you to 30. Yes, a guy with injury history, maybe you don't love that, but I think it's a good gamble to take. What do you think about it as the Cowboy fan?
Yeah, it's a prudent move. It's one of those where it's like the Cowboys as a whole, as a front office, they stack moves like these. They'll do about 3 or 4 deals like this where they find these solid contributors through their pro scouting department. They do a great job, and they'll sign good deals like this, both through the term and as far as like the dollars are concerned. And then they just take a 12 gauge to their foot because they cave to a running back, Ezekiel Elliott, and give him a ton of money and just ruin the whole thing, right? Or they they keep restructuring the contract of someone like Tyron Smith and Tony Romo. It's like two people with extensive injury histories in the latter parts of their career, and you keep restructuring their contract so that you can't get out of it when they age. And then they just ruin all the good finds that they have as a team, right? But specifically to Malik Hooker, I really like it. He's a well-rounded player just overall, which at safety in this league, that's pretty much the best you're going to get outside of maybe 1 or 2 all-pro level players. And it's funny because to take a step back, to me, Hooker was an absolute stud coming out of college. Yes, he was a first-round pick. And then, as you mentioned, right, he suffered a bunch of injuries, a torn ACL and MCL as a rookie, then a torn meniscus again in 2019, and then tore his Achilles in 2020. I mean, two of those three right there are career-altering injuries, and he just had them just sort of piled on. And I think that's actually true in this case, in the sense that it did alter his career. I've always been like irrationally high on him. I'm talking like I thought Malik Hooker would be an all-decade safety, like Hall of Fame candidate player coming into the league. I thought he was that good. So perhaps the injuries have impacted him. Yeah, perhaps they've impacted him to where he's not that uber explosive, like dynamic, like game wrecker now, but he's sort of evolved into just a solid, dependable player on the back end of a defense who is still good in coverage, still has good range, makes plays on the ball, doesn't take poor angles, and just does his job, which again, at safety, that's what you want. That's what you need. He was the 18th ranked safety last year with at least 300 snaps played on defense and top 30 in run defense and pass coverage. So again, super well-rounded, and that defense in Dallas is in phenomenal shape. They upgraded defensive tackle with a first-round pick and at cornerback with Stephon Gilmore. So the environment around him being Hooker got even better as he goes into his age 27 season, which again is right around his, that's his prime now, right? So I think it's a good move for both sides and someone that should be a weekly starter in all 22 this year and likely for the next 2 to 3 years.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to get to, right? So what do you think of him as like an all-22 general manager? I kind of think that the same thing that the Cowboys did is what you should do, right? Like he's a player that you should roster. You shouldn't be afraid to roster him because if he gets hurt, right, we made some changes in the IR that we'll be announcing soon. He'll go to your IR and he won't take up a roster spot. But if you do have him on your roster and he is healthy, he is that kind of 70 to 72 player that can fill in a moment's notice. And maybe he's even a starter for you because safety is hard to come by. And if you get that upside because of that elite level of talent that he actually has in him, you could be, getting a really valuable safety for a very low price. So I like that. I like that a lot. But let's move on to Alvin Kamara. Alvin kind of like had a couple tough years in the past, right? So 2 years in a row, 63.2 PFF grade, and then a 72.7 PFF grade. So from an all 22 perspective, I don't think we look at him as the same kind of elite player that you are looking at him as in regular fantasy, not even just because of the positional thing of being a running back and it's less valuable in all 22, but his actual production in all 22 isn't that level like it is in traditional fantasy. Now, on top of that, he goes ahead and gets a 3-game suspension for his involvement in a hotel fight that was actually kind of like a mauling. It was kind of bizarre if anybody saw the video. And you're missing him for 3 games now, right? So if you were depending on him as your running back and you were okay with that kind of middling production, he's not there for the first 3 games of the season. So Ray, what are you doing about this?
Kamara's the profile really that I just don't have on my roster anymore, right? Just never been for the last couple of years anyway. We kind of saw a decline in 2021, a slight bounce back last year, but again, that game breaker that we really haven't seen since 2020. So you're talking a 28-year-old running back in an offense now that is I mean, they've got some weapons. They did get Olave and everything, but they have Derek Carr now. So the situation is okay. It's fine. The division isn't especially tough. So it's not as if we're expecting a total replacement level player or anything, but he's not a cornerstone of my offense by any means. If you're someone who has completely avoided the running back position in your startup draft, I think he's a fine option later on when you've filled all your other starting roles if he's still around, which he may be given his age and sort of the decline we've seen in the last 2 years, and then the suspension that's coming up here now. But anything more than that, as far as taking him in the first 18 rounds or something in a startup, I would definitely not do that. I would solidify all other positions before I address or look to someone like Alvin Kamara if that's the route I'm going to go for running back. If I'm trying to get somebody who I want to just sort of set running back and forget it, I'm not going after someone like Alvin Kamara. That's someone where I address everything else, and if he's still around, I go, okay, yeah, sure, that's great. He'll come back after week 4 and he'll probably be fine. Won't win me a game, won't lose me a game, and just ride it out until you get someone younger in there for a more long-term solution. But I'm not terribly high on his prospects. I kind of see a repeat of 2022, to be honest, as from a grading perspective, as far as, mid 70s, which is fine. It's actually pretty good. But nothing that's going to win you a league or really separate you from the pack.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And it's interesting because the narrative on Kamara was that when he came out of college, right, he came out with very little wear and tear on his body. He then split time with Mark Ingram, and I think that's when we saw the best version of him. Mark Ingram then leaves. Kamara is the headliner, has like 1.5 really good years, maybe 2. And then you kind of start to see injuries pile up. And to me, I'm looking at it saying maybe he was never meant to be that workhorse back, and maybe he did work best in a committee. This year they go and they draft Keandre Miller out of, I think, TCU, right? And then they go and they just added Kareem Hunt, right? So they add 2 running backs to kind of spell Kamara with. Kamara's not going to be there for the first 3 games, but then these guys are going to spell him. And I think maybe we will see a better version of Kamara in that maybe a slightly limited role compared to what he's been asked to do in the past couple of years. So I like that for him. I think that is a good thing. And it puts you in kind of an awkward situation in all 22, because I think if you are not a guaranteed top 2-3 team, he is absolutely somebody I sell. And I think even if you are a top 2-3 team and somebody's offering you something pretty decent for him, I'm probably selling him in that situation too. But if that's not the situation and you can't get a lot for him and you are this winning team, I think he's a perfectly good running back to have on your team, because I do think that production, like you said, mid-70s production is good. It's not bad in that of position that is 2.94% of your team. That's fine, right? So I say keep him in that situation. And then also if somebody's selling them for a 7th-round pick and you are a team that is primed to win and you don't have a running back, like me, for example, like I don't typically carry a running back. Like I just stream them week after week. I have 2 guys on my team. Like last year I picked up Tyler Algier and it worked out really well. I think every year you can basically do that at running back. But a guy like Kamara is a guy that I would take in this situation for a 7th-round pick and say, okay, it's going to be my main back this year, and just, it'll be fine. And I think you can do that in all 22.
That's fair. Do you need any offensive tackles to go along with the running back?
And we're not doing this again, Ray.
Okay.
We're not creating trades on the air, right? I don't think people want to hear that.
I'm just checking.
Unless you want to give me Abraham Lucas, and then we can talk about it.
I mean, he's one of my tackles. You could make an offer for him.
Cam Jordan is the next guy we're going to talk about, because Cam Jordan surprises us with a 2-year, basically a $28 million extension. So 2-year, $28 million. It actually takes his contract all the way through 2025, when he will be 36 years old, right? We just talked about Alvin Kamara being 28 and it being very, very old. And at running back, yes, there is a bit of a difference, but we're talking about a guy that's 36 years old, making him one of the oldest players currently in the NFL. And he gets a $28 million extension. I like this deal for Jordan because obviously he's making a ton of money late in his career. That's what you want as a player. But I like it for the Saints as well, because they're a team that needs some consistency with the changes they've had in the last few years. And it's one of their leaders, right? This is a guy that is one of the most consistent players on the field, but a leader off the field as well. And paying a guy like him that kind of money at that age, it's a dangerous game to play, but you got to hope that it works out. And if it doesn't, you're paying a legacy player that's going to be there for a part of your franchise, probably for the rest of his life. Maybe he's not a Hall of Fame level player, but he's probably a Saints Hall of Fame level player. And that's why I like the deal for them. What do you think?
Yeah, Cam Jordan is one of my inaugural draft picks going back a few years now, right? So I'm just going to read off since 2015. Let's just do that, right? He was drafted all the way back in 2011, which is wild. But 2015, right? 82.
Wait, 2011 is like the Cam Newton draft, right? So like he's been playing as long as Cam Newton and longer.
I think that's the Cam Newton draft. Yeah. So at a physical position. And so as we'll see here, and playing at a high level too, but you'll notice something. So let's just start from 2015, right? 82, 90, 90.8, 89.7, 87.6, 83.7, 84.3, 74.5. That's like 7 years of elite play at a premium position at edge. That's just a super consistent, high-level player across the board. That's awesome. But we did see a 10-point drop in 2022 from 2021, and he is now 34 years old, which is it's pretty frightening, right? I think especially his pass rush grade in 2022 was in the 50s. I think it was outside the top 100 of edges, and probably goes a little bit higher when you do some snap qualifiers, but it's not good. And so is that the start of the drop, right? I certainly don't think he's going to get any better at age 34, right? I think this is a player who is rosterable, but I wouldn't want him as one of my first two edges anymore, that is. He had a great run of elite play, and now what you're hoping for is solid, doesn't have 24-year-old legs anymore. Now he's got 34-year-old legs, so that same burst is probably not there, but he's a physical veteran who's smart, solid's going to do his job, and is going to probably have a grade that reflects that without large upside or high upside week to week. And at a position like edge, I think you have to go for that high upside type of player for your starting role. And then more so if that fails, right, if you go after some boom or bust type prospects and maybe they don't hit, then you have someone like Cam Jordan to sort of fall back on a weekly basis. But I wouldn't want him any higher on my depth chart than third or fourth at edge.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. And I kind of like the idea of spelling him with a rookie, right? Like I drafted Miles Murphy in our league. Cam Jordan's a perfect guy to spell him with because Murphy's probably not going to be able to be a starter for me right away. And if those are my 3 and 4 edges and there's bye weeks coming up, I don't know if I could rely on Murphy, right? So Jordan is a guy that I can rely on, and I like him in that situation in all 22. So I agree with you.
I have him too. If you want him too, we can Abraham Lucas, Cam Jordan. We can start building something here. I got a lot of edges.
I'll give you like a 7th or something. We'll talk about it later.
Okay, we'll talk about it later. That's gonna have to come up though.
It'll have to come up. Logan Wilson. Let's talk about Logan Wilson. And you and I kind of teased this, when we were having conversations a few days ago. I have a little bit of a strong take on Logan Wilson, but he signs a 4-year, $36 million deal with a $9 million average. He's under contract now until he's 31 years old with an out after 29. Right now he's 27, but he's just played 3 years in the NFL, which means he was a 24-year-old rookie. His play last year was a huge outlier from the years previous, and that's a little bit of a concern for me. But he was PFF's 19th best graded linebacker last year with a 72.7 defensive grade. But yeah, so I wanted to talk about a few things about Logan Wilson. One, I'm definitely concerned about a guy like Logan Wilson who had a 54.7 and a 53.9 defensive grade in his first 2 seasons, then gets a 72.7 last year and then gets paid, right? He's 27 years old. Again, this deal takes him until he's 31. So you're taking him basically through his prime and maybe past. For a player with only really 1 year of true good production, if this was a younger player and he was, say, in year 3 and he was 24 years old, I understand it a little bit because you're getting more years of his prime. And maybe you think, he was a younger guy and he needed time to develop. He wasn't a man yet. But no, this is a guy that was a man. And the production really wasn't there till year 3. I just want to read out another player that I kind of see some comparisons with his contract and his grading. So this player got a 3-year, $30 million deal in 2020. His rookie year, he was at 59.6. His sophomore year, 66.2. And then his third year, 73.9. Then the first year of his new deal, he got a 58.9 grade, then a 75.9, and then basically was out of the league with a 57.8 grade in 142 snaps. And then the last year was his last year in the league. He had a 38.4 grade. Do you know who I'm talking about?
Is that Jalen Smith?
It is Blake Martinez, who the Giants signed for a $30 million deal and is now selling Pokemon cards, right? So
good for him. That's
Yeah.
He's still, if he kept them in good condition, that's impressive. Because I got a binder upstairs, but they're not in.
You didn't see like reports on him? He made like millions of dollars selling Pokemon cards.
I did not. I will always be forever grateful for him as being our sort of, our example in our early days of why this game is great. But I did not know that about him. I'm going to look that up. I'm going to add that to the things I have to do before the football season kicks off. That just makes me even more nervous over the next
Add it to your
few
list.
Yeah.
But it is a concern to me, right? So a guy that in his first 2 years didn't really produce, then in year 3 has a good year and then gets paid. And then after maybe one productive year on the new deal, he's out of the league, right? And he's a middling player. And the reason I bring this up is because I think that linebacker is a position that NFL teams are paying, right? We saw who did the Ravens sign to a Patrick? No. Who did the Ravens sign?
Roquan Smith.
Roquan Smith. So they've signed Roquan Smith to like a $100 million deal. We saw TJ Edwards get a pretty big deal. We saw a few other linebackers this offseason get paid, like good money. And the reason I'm bringing that up is because they're getting paid more money than any running back is, right? But are we so sure that the life of a linebacker is that much better than the life of a running back? And the consistency, right? Like the consistency. And another reason I bring this up is because I'm sitting here thinking, if I'm Saquon, coach, put me at linebacker, right? Like put me at edge, put me at linebacker. You're telling me that Saquon couldn't be as good as Logan Wilson? Are you kidding me? He could do that.
I mean, probably not if he just did it tomorrow. Like it'd be totally different. Like,
You don't think
you don't just
he could be
switch
as good as Logan Wilson?
No, there's a lot to learn at linebacker. What do you mean? It's not just about being able to jump out of the screen when you do those Bulgarian split squats on Instagram. It's a little tougher than that. It's a little more cerebral of a position.
Growing up, Ray, where were the good players playing? When you were a young kid, where did you play? If they were a good kid on the team, where did they play?
The ball in your hands. Yeah.
You were a quarterback or you were a running back.
Right.
I don't think that ever changed. I just think
that
when
Pee
you're a
Wee
running
coach was
back,
fighting for his life. He needed Saquon to have the ball so he could keep his job for the next season to win the district championship in Pee Wee football. He needed that.
But I don't know if that's the case anymore. Like, I don't know if that's the best thing for Saquon anymore, or guys like Saquon, right? Like if you're Bijan Robinson and you're 215 pounds, you might be able to play receiver. If you're Saquon and you're 230 pounds, hey, go try linebacker, go gain another 20 pounds and you're Micah Parsons, right? Like, I don't know if that's so far-fetched. I really don't, because those are the best athletes on the football field most times. Guys like Saquon. They could, like, I just have this feeling if he wanted to do it, he could do it and he could be that player and he could go get a big payday.
Well, he has been for the last few years, but Saquon Barkley is still the Giants' best wide receiver too. Like, he's been their best wide receiver for 3 years going now. So there's that ever since Beckham left, to be honest. So there's that. I think maybe if he just lined up out wide more often, that's probably a little easier than just saying, just play a completely new position. And you'll just pick it up. That's fine. Go ahead and tackle Tony Pollard. You'll be fine. Like, it's a little different. Speaking of Tony Pollard, by the way, one thing also for our listeners, we're always going to shoot you straight. We're not going to go on Fox Sports Network or FS1 or whatever it is and talk about how good Tony Pollard was in practice when he was attending the birth of his daughter. Somehow people get paid to do that. So there's that. So Cowboys fans know what I'm talking about if you don't, Chris.
I do not.
Yeah, it's your favorite LaShawn McCoy. I know you were a big fan of his when he was in the league. So
nope, was not.
Yeah.
But is there something to this that's going to combat what I said, or is it just you talking about
just that it's hard to play linebacker? You can't just swing. You can't just be.
I'm not saying it's easy. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm saying the best athletes on the football field are running backs most times, right? Because that's just who it was their entire lives. They were always the best athletes. I think they could play most positions on the football field besides maybe quarterback, because it's a completely different skill set, right? I'm obviously not offensive lineman because of size, but I'm saying there's probably some running backs that could be really good cornerbacks, right? They have if they have some shifty hips, like you're telling me Alvin Kamara couldn't play corner, he probably could. Probably good.
He's 215 pounds. There's not many 215-pound corners out there anymore. 5'10", 215. But he's
been trained to be that big, right? If he didn't have to be that big, you're telling me he couldn't drop 10 pounds and be a corner? Of course he could.
Just because you and I make it look easy doesn't mean that it's easy for everybody else, right? It's just a little different. We're just different.
For all of you that don't know, Ray has been just constantly calling out Des Bryant that he wants to cover him at the Expo this weekend. So if you don't come for any other reason, come to watch Ray guard Des Bryant. And you can't tell how tall we are because we're on a podcast, but Ray and I are not the tallest dudes. Not that we're super short, but we're not the tallest dudes. Des is what, 6'4", 215, 220?
6'3". Listen, if Aaron Glenn could line up against Plaxico Burress, I'm about it. It just is what it is.
So you're
play the ball.
You're comparing your talent to Aaron Glenn?
Pretty much. Relative. This is relative. This is all relative. All right. So don't think too deep. We've gotten way off track because you just wanted to come on here and trash Logan Wilson signing. Our boy Eric is mad at you now. We got a lot of Bengals fans, by the way, given the Cincinnati connection and everything, and like they're mad at you for this. I actually liked Logan Wilson coming into the NFL. I thought he was a good player. He had good in the box tape. But yeah, I didn't like that he was 24. I hate 24-year-old rookies. I hate them all. I hate all 24-year-old rookies. So there was that, right? The other thing, though, that does make me hesitate about Logan Wilson in this deal is that coverage grades as a linebacker can be really volatile. And he graded very well in coverage last year. He was a top 15 linebacker in the league in coverage. And that's not something, unless you're sort of a real top of the line linebacker.
On 542 coverage snaps too.
Right. So
it wasn't a little bit. He did great.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But can you do that year over year? Only the elite of the elite have shown that they can do that. Logan Wilson may be able to do that. And if he can, then I think you'll see him sort of stay in that 70s range, which is very good for linebacker in this league, right? But if he reverts back to the mean, then you could see a drop closer to his first 2 years in the league. And that can burn you if you're relying on him to play a big role now because maybe you drafted him a bit earlier because of the big deal in front of him. So that's something that gives me a bit of pause too. But he's got DJ Reader in front of him. And that just makes life easy for linebackers. DJ Reader is our favorite, right? So there's that. He's got that going for him. So I get the hesitancy. I'm with you, but I'm hesitant about just about every linebacker in this league after like the top 4. So I think it is what it is. You just got to pick which one you want to hitch your wagon to and hope that it comes out on top.
DJ Reader was my boy until today when he destroyed the Packers. All I saw was reports from Steve and Sam today talking about how DJ Reader and Trey Hendrickson just destroyed the Packers offensive line and made Jordan Love's life impossible. So I do love DJ Reader, just not today. And I stand by everything I said about the Logan Wilson signing, but the only thing I'll say, kind of similar to what I said about Cam Jordan, is I understand signing a leader. And if Logan Wilson is that in their clubhouse, which I don't know if he is or isn't, but if he is, then I start to understand this deal a little bit. Still don't love it. Stand by everything I said, just because I think 1 year of I never, ever, ever want to pay a guy after 1 year of production, especially a good chunk of money. If I'm going to pay somebody, I'm going to do it like the Eagles did it, where it's okay, they were in their second year as a pro, and I decided to give them a long extension because I'm telling them they're getting paid sooner. But that's not what happened with Logan Wilson, right? He was at the end of his rookie deal, had one good year, and they paid him a ton of money. Not for me. Just not for me.
Okay.
But let's go to the hidden gems, fan favorite.
Now that you're in such a great mood, let's just go straight into the hidden gems.
Yeah. Let's go to the hidden gems. Ray and I I'll speak for myself, notoriously bad at this so far. Pretty sure I said a tackle for the Steelers that got replaced in the draft. I stand by it. Who knows? I saw that he was listed as the starter on that offensive line still, so we'll see what happens. But AFC West we're going to do today. And Ray, why don't you start it off talking about who you chose for the Broncos?
Awesome. Let's just keep going at linebacker. Josie Jewell. And this guy is just a solid player. Over the last 4 years, 68, 68, 83, 71. So, again, solid. Not spectacular, right? He's not a super athlete, but he's just a solid linebacker in a league that's short of solid linebackers. The only downside to his game really is as a rusher or a blitzer, where he just does not grade well in that role at all. But with a healthy Randy Gregory and with Frank Clark there, he may not be asked to do that quite as much as he did last year in the past. And his current ADP right now is actually like right in the early 53rd round. So he's like nearly undrafted or getting drafted very late. So again, a linebacker that has as good a chance to start as pretty much anyone else outside the top 13 week to week. And you can get him that late. To me, that's a steal. If he's still there, in those late rounds in the 40s in your startups, go get him. Again, he's not going to break the bank. This is a hidden gem, not a game-wrecking, superstar. I think he's exactly what you're looking for as long as you know what he is.
We don't get to see a lot of West Coast football games besides the primetime Chiefs games that are always on, right? And sometimes the Chargers. But the Broncos weren't on a lot this year because they started to do poorly. So it's nice hearing about guys that I don't know a lot about. So thank you. I don't know a lot about him. I don't have a lot to discuss about the guy that you brought to the table. But the guy I'm bringing to the table, I did watch a lot of, and that's Adam Troutman. Pretty interesting, right? Like kind of, you're probably sitting there saying, they drafted Greg Dulcich a couple of years ago, and he's the guy, and they like him, and you're hearing reports of how well he's doing. But one thing that you don't, really look at is Troutman was drafted under Sean Payton when he was on the Saints, and Sean Payton goes to the Broncos, and one of the first moves he makes is bringing over Troutman. And I think a big reason he did that is because when you look at Dulcich? Don't know how to say his name. Dulcich. Yeah. When you look at his blocking grades, they were horrendous, right? So I'm talking sub 35 grades at both run and pass blocking. Troutman, that's his bread and butter, right? That he is a great blocker. If you look at his numbers when he was on the Saints, he had a run blocking grade 1 year of an 86.9, and he never had a grade under 60 at run blocking. And then as a pass blocker, last year was a 71.9. So that is something that he is extremely strong at, right? He is entering his age 26 season, right? One thing I know about tight ends is they typically take a long time to develop. We saw breakouts from most of the tight ends that have been good in the last 10 years around that age 26, 27 season. You could look at Travis Kelce. You could look at Darren Waller. A lot of those guys break out later in their careers, and then you see that like a lot of success. I don't know if Troutman is that, right? I don't know if he has the receiving ability to be one of those guys. If you watch some of his highlights, he is a good route runner. He is a sure-handed catcher, but he's not that fast. He's not that elusive. He doesn't break like those guys do. So I don't know if that's what I'm going to see out of his game. But when you turn 26, 27, you start to, again, develop into becoming a man, right? And when you become a man, you get stronger. And he is already a competent run blocker, already a competent pass blocker. I think that is going to be a strength of his. And in all 22, right, this is a different game, right? We're not talking about a game where you just need to get a guy that's a receiving threat and he's going to grade well and he's going to score well for you. You can have a guy like Troutman and you can be very successful. The only thing that you worry about with Troutman is snaps, right? You need to make sure he's getting enough snaps. I think because of his blocking strength, you are going to see him on the field. It is a deep tight end room, but again, I think Sean Payton brought him in for a reason, and I like Troutman this year.
He was not on my radar, but you made an interesting case there. I think the other thing I think actually what you kind of deemed as a negative could actually be a positive in the sense that when it comes to Denver and the Broncos, I mean, they already have. I've called it before on this podcast, and I'm on that train that for this year, Jerry Jeudy's going to have a huge year through the air, right? They have Jerry Jeudy, Cortland Sutton. They drafted Marvin Mims. I don't think they're looking for real receiving production from that tight end position. And if that's the case, and if Javonte Williams, as reports may indicate, is healthy and is going to be a big part of this offense, and from day one, he's not going to be on PUP or have too much of a ramp up period early on in the season, then Troutman may be called upon more to just be that solid run blocking type of player, which plays right into his hands. So I think you hit it on the head as far as, is that enough of a snap share week to week to contribute for you in all 22? I guess we have to see how that shakes out, right? It is a new offense. Sean Payton isn't necessarily a 3 yards in a cloud of dust guy, but he knows how to use his players and get the best out of his players and put them in situations to succeed. So if he does sort of play that style with the Javonte Williams on the ground and use a guy like Troutman in that role, then it's certainly possible and would be a pretty good pickup. Because I think everything else you said is kind of right on point as far as tight ends take a long time to really hit their stride anyway. And this is around the time that someone like Troutman, if it's going to happen, would hit that stride.
Cool. All right, let's jump to the Chargers. I'm gonna go first here, and I was very pleasantly surprised to find this guy, and it's Jamari Saylor. I didn't know anything about him as a prospect until he got the starting opportunity with the Chargers last year. And I think he was very overlooked as a prospect out of Georgia, and he didn't end up getting drafted until the 6th round last year. He filled in for Rashawn Slater when he got hurt, and he was forced into that left tackle spot. I don't think that's where they originally drafted him for. And in week 4, all of a sudden they're saying to him, "You're our left tackle." And I think he really held his own. He let up too many pressures, but only 5 of those pressures that he let up over, I think it was 14 weeks converted into snaps. Only 5 sacks in 14 weeks, which is good for about 29th, which is league average, right? Like that's pretty good. Again, it's not great, but it's pretty good for a guy that was just thrown into a really difficult situation. When I looked at him as a prospect, he did play tackle sometimes. He played some guard as well, but I think he was really built for that guard position. He's 6'3", 321 pounds, and he moves really well. He has good feet. He moves quickly. He has some subtleness to him. And I saw that in a lot of what he did last year for the Chiefs, even at tackle, right? They moved him around a lot. If you look at a lot of his successful plays, if you watch some of his highlight tapes, they had him moving even at the tackle position. So they were pulling him. They were doing little steps with him to get him in space and make the defense uncomfortable. One thing I do want to see is I want to see him start to control his body a little bit more. He moves well, but he doesn't control his frame like a mature player would. When you look at a guy like Andrew Thomas, who now has established himself as one of the best tackles in the league and has a big frame, he has control with he's strong enough to control his frame. I don't think Saylor's really there yet, but it's something he can do. Now, again, Slater's going to be back at that left tackle spot. He's going to slide into either right guard or left guard. I think it's right guard because Zion Johnson will be back at left guard. And I love that, right? So you're talking about an offensive line now that's got Slater, it's got Zion Johnson, it's got Corey Lindsey, and then you've got a couple of young guys on the right side. But that's a lot of veteran presence in that offensive line and a lot of high draft picks on that offensive line. Should be really good, right? And this is a guy, when I looked at his kind of week to week, right, I saw grades in his first start in week 4 at left tackle, right, thrown into left tackle. He had a 78.6 grade on offense. It's incredible, like really, really good, right? So that he's not afraid. He's not gun shy. He's a guy that can be thrown into the fire and do well. And I'm talking all the way down to week 18 now, right? So we're talking a whole season, 14 weeks, rookie year, thrown into the fire, probably exhausted out of his mind, never played a season that long. Last week of the season against Denver, he had a 72.6 grade to end his year. I love that, right? I love that. And now again, he's going into probably what's a much more natural position to hit for him at guard. And I think he can be very successful there.
Man, I'm so proud of you, Chris. You're starting to talk like a draft guy. That was my guy. I had Jamari Salyer. So yeah, that was my guy for. I'm going through my notes. You pretty much hit them all, right? I think you kind of mentioned it, likely to be a guard now. He's projected, I think, at right guard for this season. So depending on that update, right, he'll likely be switched to be listed as a guard. So you're going to have that change in value from tackle to guard. But he was actually, I think, the 25th, or he was a top 25 pass blocker overall last year, right? And so the other thing is with Kellen Moore, who I think he's gotten a ton of praise heaped his way this offseason. I think some of that's a little bit ahead of him. So I think he's a good coordinator who runs an open offense, and that kind of caters to and plays right into Salyer's hands. But so I think to that aspect, as it relates to Salyer, that's good. But some of the other stuff that's said about Kellen Moore, you could tap the brakes a little bit about. There's some things where he doesn't make the quarterback's life the easiest, but we're not talking about Justin Herbert. We're talking about Jamari Salyer. So to that end, I think the the prospect of Kellen Moore coming in and running a bit of a more open offense plays into Salyer's hands. You mentioned that athleticism, and with his production as a pass blocker, I think that helps him when he is in his more natural position at guard on the inside. And it's just a matter of that, natural growth and development of a young player now in his second season in the league to kind of tighten up those other loose ends to his game, like that core strength you were mentioning, to become a more well-rounded player. I liked him a lot. He was a highly regarded prospect in college, highly ranked coming into college, played really well. And yeah, he's built for guard. He's not built for tackle. The fact that he came in and performed admirably at tackle is another feather in his cap, but make no mistake about it, this guy's a guard and a good one. So yeah, all in on Jamari Salyer.
Cool. All right. So since I took your guy, why don't you start it off with the Chiefs?
Chiefs, it's a bit of a shot in the dark, largely because this roster is so established that few players are really sleepers, right? You just have your superstar players and then everyone else who's sort of filling in their role and doing it at a high level. Obviously, they won the Super Bowl. So I'm going with Justin Reed. He was the 32nd overall safety in 2022, played a lot of snaps and is a plus coverage grader and blitzer. He's got a stable sort of trio of corners in front of him. And given that it's the Chiefs and he's likely to be playing with lots of leads, that just plays more into his coverage strength. So while I'm not, we talked about Malik Hooker earlier, for example, right? I think on a week-to-week basis, I think Malik Hooker is more of a safer, steady bet. So I wouldn't rank him above Malik Hooker, but Justin Reed is another guy who I think can give you a lot of value at safety. He's not going to be a superstar. You're not drafting him very early, but he can be a starter for you week to week if needed at that safety position. Because again, it's all supply and demand. There's not a lot of supply, so the demand is going up, and someone like Justin Reed starts to look better and better.
I like that pick a lot for another reason too, and that's the Chiefs have been investing a lot in their pass rush, right? So like a couple years in a row now, they have first-round draft pick capital spent on edge rusher. I like that, and what it also allows, we've talked about, is Chris Jones to go back to his natural position of defensive interior, right? So the Chiefs are now building this pass rushing group that should be more effective, and you're talking about a team that's always ahead, right? Every other team is coming from behind. Justin Reed just gets to sit there and be a center fielder and go catch some balls, right? And I think he can do that really well and at a high level. He's graded fairly well in his career, 70 grading 3 of his 5 years in the NFL. The 2 years that he kind of dipped under that, you talk about that probably wasn't the best Chiefs teams. That's kind of when, they started to take a dip themselves. And we talked about Chris Jones experiments where they were moving him all over the place. It wasn't the best Chiefs defense for sure, but I think they've come a long way since then. So that's a great pick. I love that. My guy is also on that defense. And one of the notes I had that you touched on is I feel like this team is very studs and scrubs. That's their approach of doing things, right? It's let's get our stud guys. Let's pay them a ton of money. And then we're really not going to pay a lot of other guys. We just got to go into the draft and hope we get talented players, which they've done a really good job of, right? There's guys like L'Jarius Sneed that are grading out through the roof as some of the top players at their positions. And a guy that I like as my hidden gem is Leo Chanel, who was their 3rd round pick last year at the linebacker position. And he played a lot of limited snaps to start the season. And he had a bit of a rough stretch to start the year, right? As a rookie, he didn't play a lot and he was having some rough games. Linebacker, we talked about, it's hard, right? It's not as easy as being Saquon Barkley, going in there and being a stud. Doesn't matter if you're Saquon or Leo Chanel, it's hard. And he struggled as a rookie for the first, I'd say 9 weeks of the season and got limited snaps. But when you look at how he finished his year, the last 4 games of the regular season, he really showed up to play, and he had over 20 snaps in each of those games. So he would have been a starter in all 22. And in those games, he had a 74.6, an 82.9, 51.6, which was a down game, and then a 69.5. So you're talking about above average to average games to end the season as a starting level player in all 22. And then one other thing I'd point out is in the Super Bowl, he had a sack and 5 tackles, an 86 grade on 18 snaps. So that is an extremely productive 18 snaps for linebacker Leo Chanel. And you know how I like linebackers. I like big, mean linebackers, 6'3", 250 pounds. He's a guy that has great gap recognition and knows how to get his nose to the football. When you watch his tape, he does it very consistently. one thing I was surprised about him as a rookie compared to him in college is his coverage ability. He blew past my expectations in coverage. On the year, he had a 60.5 grade, which again is average, but you're talking about a 6'3", 250-pound linebacker having an average coverage grade. I think that's incredible, right? So there was a lot to like about his film, a lot to like about his rookie season, and a lot to like about the way he ended his rookie season. So while the Chiefs probably are pretty set at linebacker, and I'm not sure Chanel will be an every down starter because they have Gay and Bolton there, I do think he gets a lot more attention this year and a lot more opportunity on that defense.
Yeah, about 4 seconds after you said his name, I was like, oh, yeah, duh. He's 6'3", 250. That's
my guy.
That's his guy. You'll draft him and Jack Campbell and just roll them out there on the field, and you'll call him whatever, Engage 8 or something, and be good to go. But yeah, I think the thing with Chanel is just, will his role continue to grow so that he is playing at a consistent snap share that allows you to play him week to week? Because all those things you listed, yeah, and we talked about the line in front of him getting better, right? They invested on the edge. They have Chris Jones on the interior. That's where you want to be on defense, right? You got some good players behind you. You got some great players in front of you. So now just go out there and make plays. And as you basically pointed out, right, as his rookie year progressed, that's what he did more and more. So if that progression continues, yeah, I think it's right in line. I like it.
Cool. All right. I'm going to start off the Raiders because I want you to finish it. And the reason I'm going to start it off is because I promised myself and I promised the listeners when we started this exercise that if I didn't believe there was a player to be talked about, I wouldn't talk about one. And the Raiders might be the only situation. And I also, I'll add the caveat that last week I was making fun of you for choosing rookies because I didn't want to do that, right? I don't want to say one of these rookie players as the hidden gem, because if they were drafted this year, in the first few rounds, there's a good chance that they're not hidden gems and they're good football players. And I talked enough about Michael Mayer in kind of the draft process about how I really like him and I think he's going to be a great football player and how he's going to be a great player for the Raiders. And I still believe that. But in my eyes, he is not a hidden gem. And when I look at this roster and I look at this team, I didn't see one player that stood out to me as this is a guy I want to invest in and hold on my football team because I think one day he can be a great player and a starter and a positive starter for my football team. I don't think there was one player on this team that did that for me. And on top of that, and another reason that I didn't want to just go out on a line and pick somebody is because I think the coaching staff is going to change at the end of this year. And a player that you like that, again, not one of the rookies, but player you like that was maybe a hidden gem from the past few years and a guy that's going to come up and you think is going to do well. I think that there's a good chance when they switch the coaching staff, most of those guys are going to get replaced anyway, right? If it's not my guy, it's going to be a new guy. And I think a lot of coaches have that attitude. So from my perspective, I'm going to stay away from a lot of the Raiders players that aren't already established players. So I'm sorry, guys. I got nothing for you here. So Ray, you tell me who you have.
Yeah, the Raiders are tough. It's like when you were in school and you had to write a paper and it had to be 4 pages when you made your point in 1.5. But now you just gotta really reach and stretch to find things, play with the margin slightly and hope the teacher doesn't notice. And that's kind of how it is picking the Raiders. But I have one guy, and this is the only guy on that entire roster that basically I would consider, which is Trevon Moehrig. He had a really poor year last year, as did that entire team, right? But this is a second-round draft pick in 2021. Has good ability. He's got good size and good athleticism. And, as a rookie, he was a top 25 safety. But again, he had a huge step back last year, as everybody did. And we know safety can be volatile. So sometimes you just have to take a step back and just bet on a guy with good size, good athleticism, and good draft capital that has shown he can play at a high level because, again, he was a top 25 safety in 2021. He posted a 77.7 coverage grade in 2021 and a just under 70 tackling grade overall in 2022, and run defense was the strongest part of his grade in 2022, despite the overall grade being poor. And he's probably going to have to tackle a lot because they're going to be behind a lot of games. Opponents probably going to be running, and he's just going to have to make some plays. So he's just shown on either end of the spectrum that he can play well, whether it is on the back end in coverage or coming up and just making a solid tackle and stopping the play for whatever gain it ends up being. So you just have to bet on that. And it might be one of those things, like you said, it's not going to show this year, and there is going to likely be a new coaching staff next season or next year in 2024. And so what does that look like? It is a new regime, but if I'm betting on anybody to perform well and maybe be part of the solution for a new regime, it is a guy like Trevon Moehrig, who is young and has some ability and just needs to be in a better environment and not just a toxic environment that we've seen really sort of drain the life and ruin the careers of players year over year. For the most part, it's bad organizations that result in poor careers more so than just, it's not like these players can't play when they come into the league and have this ability. So I'm betting on Moehrig. If I have to take anyone from the Raiders, I feel like I've talked a lot about safety this episode, but the other two are safer bets, right? If we're going to just do that comparison right now, I think Malik Hooker, I mentioned it before, Malik Hooker first, and then followed by Justin Reed, and then I would take a chance on Trevon Moehrig in that order. So, it's just one of those where you gotta take someone for the exercise, and it's Trevon Moehrig, and I wouldn't be shocked if he does perform well because he's shown it before, but definitely given the situation and everything else going there in Vegas, you don't want to have to depend on it.
I like that pick. It's interesting because if you look at that 2021 draft, they got two defensive backs that both had very good rookie seasons, and that's Moehrig and Nate Hobbs at corner. Nate Hobbs being a 5th round pick that year. And they both had awful years last year. Right? Took a huge step back. I don't know what it was, right? Is it the new coaching regime? Is it just a lack of talent around them? Is it their rookie year was kind of a fluke? I don't know. And I don't know what to make of it. And that's why, to me, like, I'm just going to stay away. But I also think, like, Hobbs broke out to an extent, that 80 grade where I don't know if he's a hidden gem, right? Like, I actually have him on my team because I think he's a good football player. I don't think he's really a hidden gem anymore. I think Moehrig falls a little bit more into that hidden gem category because, 71 grading as a rookie, yeah, it's good, but it's not like he was amazing, right? He wasn't
Javon Holland.
Right, exactly. So I'll let you have that one. And, again, you're grabbing at straws. You made that 4-page paper out of, when you had your point made at 1. So I like it. We were supposed to do the NFC West today, but I was unprepared. So we're going to save that for another day. And I think, we're at 58 minutes is a good time to wrap it up. So everybody, thank you so much for tuning in. If you haven't yet, please give us a follow on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok at all22_PFF, and leave us a review wherever you watch or listen to your podcast. And again, we are live for signups. If you can go to all-22.com and use promo code second season, that's the number 2 ND season, for $20 off your all 22 membership for 2023. I would do it immediately. Get in there, draft your team, and tell us why we're wrong about all the takes we just made. So we look forward to hearing from you, and hopefully we see some of you at the expo this weekend. Have a great night.
Go.